Hey, what's up? We're back, Barrel Proof Baseball Podcast, which is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the absolute best in supporting your men's grooming needs. Manscaped offers precision engineered tools and they obsess over their technology developments to provide you with the very best in men's grooming. Manscaped is trusted by over 2 million men worldwide. As an exclusive offer to my listeners, Manscaped is offering 20% off plus free shipping when you use the code BPB at manscaped.com. The Manscaped hooked me up with their Perfect Package 3.0 kit, which includes their third generation trimmer, the Lawnmower 3.0, which includes a ceramic blade to reduce any of those annoying grooming accidents, thanks to their advanced skin safe technology. There's a built-in LED light and is also waterproof. They also included their anti-chafing deodorant, which is great for anybody that doesn't want to chafe, and their toner. Smells delightful. They threw in a travel bag, which is great for traveling or storing. They also threw in some Manscaped boxers, which are really comfortable. So definitely recommend checking those out. The job that Lawnmower 3.0 does is outstanding. So check it out, 20% off free shipping by using the code BPB when you visit manscaped.com. That's 20% off free shipping at manscaped.com with the code BPB. Other ways to support the channel, head into the description box below and click on Patreon. When you do that, you can subscribe to be a monthly donor. With that, different levels between like $5 and $25 a month. You can get a Glencairn glass etched with the Barrel Proof Baseball logo. You can get the Irish whiskey ceramic coin or the bourbon ceramic coin. I have a bunch of them up there. They're fun to collect. Collect these ones. If you don't want to subscribe monthly, you could always just email me at barrelproofbaseball@yahoo.com and I can get you some of those. All right. Next one in the link in the description below. Check out the link for the Amazon store. Okay, you can buy stuff from Amazon, which we all do. It's just stuff that I like because again, this is all about me. So check it out. There's books, there's coffee items. There's barware because we like barware type stuff and drink a lot of coffee. So check those out. That helps support the channel. And then go check out our friends at Walkoffs and Whiskey. They've got an Instagram account. They've got a website, walkoffsandwhiskey.com. They've got shirts. They're doing a great thing. They're combining the two greatest things in America, whiskey and baseball. So check those guys out. Really like what they're doing. Today's guest is New York Yankees catcher Kyle Higashioka. Kyle was a 7th round draft pick out of Edison High School in 2008 by the Yankees, who are they are the only team he's played with. So he's been with the organization for a long time, and it's the only organization he's known. So it's pretty cool for Kyle to have been with them for that long. Actually, fun fact, he said that the only person that's been with him longer is Brett Gardner, since I think he said '04. So check out this interview with Kyle. My interest with him was I was one of Kyle's high school coaches for 3 years. So I got an opportunity to see Kyle for his upbringing from 15 or 16 years old, and so it's been a lot of fun to watch him grow into the role that he's in now. The conversation was great. Went a lot of different ways. The ups and downs of his career, where he's at now, adjustments he's had to make. And we got to talk a little catching at the end, which is definitely fun for me. I really enjoyed it. It was a great conversation with Kyle. Really excited for him and really proud of his accomplishments and his perseverance to continue playing through some injuries and some tough times to get where he's at. And Kyle is as humble as he's always been, and I really was grateful for his time and the conversation that we got to have. So I hope you enjoy it. Make sure you subscribe to the channel below. And here's Kyle Higashioka. All right, Kyle Higashioka, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tony.
So, all right, 7th round draft pick. We're gonna start at the beginning. 7th round draft pick out of Edison, 2008 by the Yankees. You were committed to Cal, and what was that process like for you, just in terms of deciding of going to Cal or signing with the Yankees?
So for me, I think it was more of like what would it take signing bonus wise for it to be worth it for me to forego college because I figured I'd be okay either way.
Mhm.
My grades were good enough to where I knew, college was a fine option for me, but also I thought I was ready to go to pro ball. If it was kind of financially worth it, because obviously to give up college at that time, coming out of high school, you kind of have to be like set up for a little while, um, in order to just make that work. So I think we told every team the same number. Most teams said like, good luck, good luck in college.
Yeah.
And there were a couple teams at the end, the Yankees and the Indians, that were pretty interested. Um, and then obviously on draft day, first day was the first 6 rounds. Nobody took me, and so I kind of thought like, okay, like this is what I expected. I expected to go to college. And then Dave Keith, my scout with the Yankees, he called me up and he was like, hey, you still willing to sign? Uh, and I was like, yeah, of course. And he's like, all right, we're gonna take you. And so first pick on the second day, which was the 7th round, um, they took me.
So how long was that decision? Is that pretty quick for you once you found out you got drafted and you'd obviously talked to Dave, you had your number in mind. Was that pretty quick that you were able to make that decision to get out and start playing?
Yeah, the decision was easy because
Mhm.
I mean, everything kind of lined up how I had hoped. But back then, the process was if you signed for over slot money, you had to get it. The team had to get it approved by the commissioner's office, and it was like it was some sort of domino effect where
Mm.
one team had to start that process, and then once the commissioner's office approved their request, like all the other teams who had over slot guys lined up ended up kind of their requests pouring in, and they basically had said, you got to approve this guy because you did that guy.
Yeah.
And that year I think the Yankees signed almost everybody for over slot
Wow. It's not
because
bad.
they
It's
were
a
they
good.
were putting a lot of money into the farm system, so it was
Yeah.
like they were really trying to build it up.
So you're coming out of high school, you're in Southern California and you're off to Florida to start your pro career. Like, what's that transition like for you coming out of high school, being around a lot of different players from different places, different languages, different experience levels? What was that transition like for you?
So it was definitely tough transitioning from 2 days a week playing to 6 days a week.
Mhm.
So we had Sundays off in rookie ball, but I mean, still 6 days a week. It was like you're playing every day, and my body wasn't ready for it. I remember just thinking like, wow, this is like a lot tougher than I thought it would be, just because I'm like I've never played every single day before. Um, and so that was a kind of a wake up call. First year, I knew I had to get a lot stronger. I had to work, hard in the off season to like try to catch up to the guys who are more like adult, like with me being 18. But one of the things that benefited me was the Spanish classes in high school.
Yeah.
Like taking 3 years of Spanish and then going straight into pro ball and being immersed with a lot of Spanish speakers. I kind of carried that through, and it helped me a lot because then I speak pretty good Spanish. I
Mhm.
wouldn't say it's like fluent, but it's probably like equivalent to a young child, like a toddler, or maybe a little more advanced.
Late toddler.
Yeah, late toddler.
Yeah. No, especially I'm assuming, as a catcher, like being able to communicate with guys that are speaking different languages, especially the amount of Spanish speakers that are in the systems. I mean, that's a huge advantage for a catcher, particularly.
Yeah, and it kind of endears yourself a little bit to the guys who speak Spanish, because it's like they know you're putting in an effort to learn their culture, and to just be accommodating, because I mean English is a tough language to learn. So
Mm-hmm.
um, some guys can do it, some guys have a really tough time at it. So it just helps being able to speak Spanish.
I've certainly seen that where just the effort that you put in to try and speak Spanish it goes a long way, because again, you're getting a lot of players that are young, that are outside of their, their home, and some of them for the first time and in a very different environment. So that goes a long way, I think, with players that are trying to navigate their way through this just like you are.
Yeah, it definitely helps because I mean they're like thousands of miles away from their
Mhm.
families and what they know. So um, it definitely really helps, especially like just building relationships.
Yeah. Would you say your biggest adjustment was like the strength training itself in terms of, getting stronger and being able to handle that workload that increases?
Yeah, I think it was the physical nature of the game because I
Mhm.
wasn't like a. I mean, you probably noticed when you were coaching me back in high school, but I wasn't like the biggest like weightlifter or anything. I wasn't. I always felt like I was at a slight disadvantage physically in
Mhm.
high school. I mean, there's a ton of guys that were way stronger than me, but I learned that like, I had to really step up that part of my game in order to compete at this level because it can put you at a huge disadvantage if you're not physically able to compete with everyone else.
Sure. Going into so when now you've gotten yourself into pro ball, like you've got a couple of years under your belt. And I mean, one thing I'll say, drafted in '08 and now being with the same organization for 13 years. I mean, I can't imagine there's very many guys throughout baseball that are in that same position that have been with one organization from the time they were drafted 13 years ago till right now. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I mean, Brett Gardner, he's
Yeah.
he's he's been with us since 2004. So
Oh, wow.
drafted uh drafted and signed by the Yankees in 2004 and never played for a different team. So
Man.
I think there is something a little different about the Yankees. I think they just, they seem to do things right, and it's a really good place to be, as long as you're working hard and playing well. So
Hmm.
I think you know, it's easy for guys to want to stay in the same place for that long.
Sure. Yeah, that makes total sense. I can definitely understand that. So you get in 2008, get a couple years in, and you start into like 2012. Couple injuries, you go through 2012 where you had 44 games, 2013 you had 7 games, 2014 you had 17 games. So what was that like? That's three years of, obviously with some difficulty with injuries and fighting that. I mean, what was that period like for you in terms of handling that, just mentally and physically trying to get yourself back to playing?
Yeah, so 2012, I didn't really. That was kind of I think the beginning of them realizing I wasn't really hitting as well as they had hoped, and so in 2012, I went from high A down to low A mid-season, and that was definitely a tough one because when you sign, you're like think that it's going to be, I'm going to just keep moving up and I'm going to go to the
Trajectory.
big leagues. There's a certain timetable, and like if that doesn't happen, you think that like, oh, this is in huge jeopardy.
Mhm.
So that was definitely tough. And then in 13, I actually became a backup for. Oh no, 12. I went up and down from double A back to high A, and I was
Mhm.
actually Gary's backup in high A. And then 13, I was a backup in double A for John Ryan Murphy, and that's when I had Tommy John. So I only played the first month of the season. I hit well, I mean, for 25 at bats or whatever, but had Tommy John. Was coming back from that in 14. Broke my thumb right when I was about to get sent back out to um, double A, I think. And so that kept me out for another 8 weeks. And so then that basically threw away all of 14. And then I was able to go to the fall league for as a taxi squad player, and I hit really well. But again, it was only like 25 at bats or so. But that was kind of like the turning point of like, post surgery. I was like, okay, I can still do this. I just need to like really get my act together.
Were there, I mean, through that period with the injuries and stuff, was there ever doubts that, like you said, you were finally, like, you were hitting and you were feeling good? Like, was there doubts creeping in at that point before that?
Yeah, I mean, I was taking like college classes.
Mhm.
When they let me rehab at home, and during the whole rest of the 2013 season. And so I was taking like classes and stuff, just in case it didn't work out with baseball. Um, and when you're out for so long, you just like can't help but just think like,
Let the mind
maybe I'm
wander.
not, yeah, maybe I'm not going to come back from this, because I had a few setbacks too. So it was like, I had to kind of work through some stuff, and
Mhm.
but I mean, in the end, it ended up being totally fine.
So 15, 16 come around, get full seasons in, played 100 games each year pretty much. And then 2017, didn't have what played, I think, 21 games that year in the minor leagues. And then you got your first call up in 17, right?
Hmm.
What's that like? Like, what everybody wants to know, like, what's that phone call like? What is that like being, or in person, whatever it was, like, what is that like being told you're going to the big leagues for the first time, especially after, at that point, 9, 10 years in the minor leagues?
So, I mean, I had a great year in 2016,
Mhm.
and that was kind of like my breakout year. And the defensive part had always been there, but it was like always the bat that was like, okay, like if you could only hit, like, you would be a guy. And so I finally hit in 16, and at the end of the year, I was like, oh, like I'm in a great spot, and they put me on the 40 man, and I was like, you kind of get the feeling like this is, there's a really good chance that this might happen in the next year or so. And it was, I mean, it was really surprising that it happened in like the first week of the season in 17. But me, my wife Elise, and we were out to dinner in Buffalo, and we had just played our first game of the year, because like the first 4 days got snowed out. And so, you know, I just played. We were out to dinner, and then she got a text from Mark Trumbo's wife, because the Yankees were in Baltimore, and she was like, hey, Gary just came out of the game or something. I think he might have like hurt himself. And then like immediately, we just like, I think our stomachs just dropped. Like, oh my gosh, like something could happen here. And then I think 5 minutes later, I got a call from the AAA manager saying I'm going to New York. So like our food hadn't even come yet, and we basically just like asked for the check as soon as the food got there. I didn't even eat a single bite. We paid and then immediately left. But it was just like one of the craziest feelings I think I've ever had.
What's that? So what's your first day? I mean, what's it like? Like, you get to Yankee Stadium and like, now what? Like, you're just there, and then what do you do? Like, how's it changed?
Yeah. So I got to Baltimore, and it was kind of cool because I had been working out for the past few off seasons with Trumbo.
Hmm.
So we became pretty good friends. And he would always tell me like, hey, like you're a big leaguer. Like you're gonna be there someday. Like I can just see it in your swing and your work
Hmm.
ethic and whatnot. And I was like, like, okay, like we'll see what happens. But it was cool because when I got called up, I went to Baltimore, and he was there. He was like, when I first got on the field for BP, he was like waiting for me to come out of the dugout. And it was just really cool to have him there for
Hmm.
that. And but yeah, when we got to New York, I made my debut in the ninth inning of the home opener, and I think I almost missed almost every single pitch, uh, just because like the nerves were almost
Sure.
crippling. And but that was really helpful because I think Girardi wanted me to get in there and
Hmm.
get like a little taste before, because I was starting like the next day with another guy, Jordan Montgomery, who was making his major league debut. And I mean, we both ended up having a pretty good game. I didn't get any hits, but I caught well and we won. So it was like perfect start to to the big leagues. You never want to lose as a catcher, at least.
Yeah, right. That's awesome, man. You're okay. So speaking of, you didn't get any hits, you started out your career 0 for 22 in the big leagues,
Yeah.
and you get your first knock off of David Price. It's a home run, Yankee Stadium, and I have to imagine, like, from a fan's perspective, like, that Yankees Red Sox, in Yankee Stadium's got to be something just a little bit different, like a little bit elevated. So how's that first hit feel, especially a homer off David Price?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty surreal. I tell this I tell this to the guys all the time when they like ask about the streak, as they call it. Because I had to sit on like an 0 for 18 for an entire off season, and like I'm like, am I ever gonna get like a major league hit? So I went up again in 18, and I was like feeling good at the plate, even though I had a horrible time in AAA before that. At the time I got called up, I was feeling pretty good, so I was like, okay, like this is, I think we're in a good spot right now. And I wasn't supposed to play at all versus the Red Sox, but Romine he like tweaked his hammy, and I mean, luckily for us, because we were already down to 2 catchers, it wasn't like an actual strain. It was just like, I think he like tweaked it, but he came out early enough to just like not really damage it. But then I ended up starting Sunday Night Baseball against the Red Sox with Severino pitching. So it was like I was already pretty nervous, just because the Red Sox that year were like insane.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, we were trading off like getting our ass kicked versus kicking their ass.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's obviously like a lot of pressure. And I remember we were just like, for some reason the guys love just crushing David Price. So it was like, all right, we got Price on the mound. Like, we're gonna, we got to do some damage today. And I remember he struck me out the first at bat, and it was, he pitched me really well, but he had like this backdoor cutter that he kept wanting to go to like every single righty with 2 strikes. And then second at bat, he happened to just like pull one right down the middle, and it just like went straight into my bat path. And at that point, like, I had so much pent up anxiety that I knew if I could just make contact in fair territory, it was going to be a homer.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I was like, I made contact, and I saw it was like going to be a home run, and I was like almost in like a dream state, rounding the bases.
I remember watching that, and the camera kept zooming in on your face, and I'm stoked for you. I'm super excited watching this, and it kept zooming in on you. It looked like you're trying so hard not to smile. I'm like, man, I don't know. I think I'd be grinning ear to ear right now, if that was happening.
Yeah,
so
I'm normally not a smile guy, like,
yeah,
hitting homers, but
sure.
I was trying my best not to.
And then
I got the silent treatment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the streak, as they say. Now you've got your next 2 hits or homers, and I mean, it's nine guys in Major League Baseball history that have had their first 3 hits be home runs. Like, that's pretty cool. Like, what's the streak story like?
Well, I guess it was a good way to atone for the 0 for 22 to start. But yeah, I mean, next game I was like 0 for, it was Anibal Sanchez. He was kind of tough on us that game. And then I think Newcomb started, because I played like 5 days in a row, because Romine was, his hamstring was bugging him, so he needed like a week off. So I ended up playing 5 days in a row, which was actually really good for me hitting wise, because I could get into a little bit more of a rhythm. It was a little easier on me. So we faced Newcomb, and I hit the home run there, and I was, obviously very, very pumped. But I was like, that could happen, whatever. And then the next day we faced Teheran on a day game, and I remember like the 2-0 fastball, hitting it off the bat, and I was like, I saw it sailing out over the fence, and I was like, man, is this like even possible? Like, am I now? I was like, am I ever not going to hit a home run?
It's all I'm gonna do from now on.
Yeah. So I was like, that one, I think I couldn't help but smile, because it was
Sure.
like, it felt so ridiculous to me that I like couldn't get a hit, and then after I couldn't get a hit that wasn't a homer.
You've had, so I mean, again, now you've got some more at bats under your belt, coming up to like this point in time. But like last year, you had a 3-homer game against Toronto. You had a homer in the ALDS against Snell to tie the game in the 6th. Like you've had some memorable home runs, to say the least. I mean,
Yeah.
some big moments, and is there a moment in terms of that sticks out to you, or anything like that?
Um, Probably the playoff homer. It's just like, especially being in New York, the playoffs mean so much. Like, it's not enough just to make the playoffs. Like,
Mhm.
the goal every single year is to win the World Series. So, um, I know it's just so important to perform in the playoffs. And there's been guys that, if they don't perform in the playoffs, they look for somebody else,
Sure.
even if they're good regular season players. So it's like, it's just it was just pretty cool to be in that big spot and be able to deliver.
That's awesome, man. I mean, there's been so many. It just seems to me like, from a somebody who's followed you in your career, and seeing some of those moments, how you finally get the call up, and you get your first knocks a homer, and then it's 3 in a row, and then you have a 3-homer game and a playoff homer. I mean, those are some really cool moments from a fan's perspective. And I'm sure just trying to put myself in your shoes, like after that journey, that's got to be pretty cool.
Yeah, I definitely am grateful for kind of having some more memorable moments, I guess. It's pretty cool. But I mean, I also try to tone it down and
Yeah,
keep it business while I'm out there.
sure. Yeah, I think from a fan's perspective, it's like, it's really cool to see. But then it's once you get past those things, it's like your first game, it's the 9th inning, and you guys got a big lead, and I'm sure it's your first day in the big leagues, and you're unbelievably nervous. And then that nervousness probably wears off a little bit, and now you're playing the game.
Yeah.
Besides, so, oh, good.
No, I was just
Oh,
agreeing.
yes. So so outside of those types of things, like from a type of a fans look into it, you mentioned 2016. Was there, in your offensive production that year, was there any sort of swing change that you made, or anything that you tried to like refocus on in terms of what you were doing offensively to make those improvements?
Yeah, so I kind of went a little bit against the grain that year. Our kind of organizational philosophy was more of like the old school,
Mhm.
kind of almost like a Charlie Lau type,
Mhm.
create backspin, low line drives. But for me, it just didn't work. Like, I mean, I had bought into that and done it for several years, and it just wasn't working for me. So I had to take a leap of faith and almost go back to what I initially believed, which was more of the Ted Williams style of, I don't know if you've read The Science of Hitting,
Oh yeah,
his
definitely.
book. I read it
Mhm.
like 7 or 8 times in high school. But just like matching the plane of the pitch with your bat
Mhm.
path, slight uppercut, just to give you the most margin for error. Because I mean, if you're matching the plane of the pitch, you've got like, so much room to be slightly off and still have a decent result. Like, your
Mhm.
flush would be like a gapper, or like a line drive somewhere. If you miss over the ball, you're hitting like a top spin one hopper through the infield, and if you miss under it, it's a homer. So,
Mhm.
um, kind of that whole thing of using more of the physics aspect of hitting. I guess the science of hitting
Yeah.
is what the book's called.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So
yeah.
that's kind of the big adjustment I made. And I actually was just trying to hit 300. I was like, well, I just want to have a respectable average. Like I don't,
Mm,
if I get to double digit homers, I'll be really happy because I've never
mm,
done that. And then I ended up hitting like 21,
yeah.
and I was like, that's when I knew that like this is what I need to do from now on.
Is that something that's difficult for you, not necessarily for you like personally, but just in general? Because there's a lot of different thoughts out there right now about hitting, and you can get onto the hitting Twitter stuff, and you get lost in there because
Yeah.
everybody's going to want to defend or support one way or the other of like, hey, we want to be short to the ball, but we want to create some space and create some length and some margin for error, like you said, by matching the plane to the pitch. Like, is that hard to go against the grain and really recognize that whatever you're doing is not working regardless of what the thought is, and you need to make a change?
Yeah. Cause I mean, it's tough because you could keep doing what you're doing and take this, the safe route
Mm-hmm.
and kind of think like, well, I've been just having like bad years. I just need to like, work harder at the same thing, or swing at better pitches, or just like, get luckier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think you just, and there's a multitude of different, every single guy on our team has a different way of thinking about the swing. So there's definitely nothing absolute in terms of what you need to think about.
Mm.
Like um another hitter could have, trying to get to the same point that I am, but think totally opposite. Like they could be thinking that they're going straight down to the ball, but in reality, like their game swing is,
Mm-hmm.
up through the ball or whatever. But if that's what they need to do to be successful, then that's what they need to think, and that's what they need to work on or whatever. I mean, A-Rod did it for years where he was like, everything was this down through the ball.
Mm-hmm.
But then you look at a swing on video and it's like, well, he's not swinging down. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's got a nice, relatively level bat path, and that's why he hit like 700 homers or whatever.
I think that's it. I think that
But yeah,
I think that's an issue, I think, right now with this whole like hitting revolution that's going on, is like you've gone from a place of let's match the plane of the pitch to like almost an absurdity of swinging straight uphill to just create the almighty launch angle. And like that's in reality, that's not what most hitters are thinking. Like most hitters are not thinking about
yeah,
some of the things that are being overly pushed in terms of like hitting, people teaching hitting right now. And like you said, your thought might be going from short A to B just to get to the contact point, and that's not what's actually happening when you break down their video. And it's really easy to look at video and go, well, that's not what you're doing, but you don't know what's going on in a hitter's head.
yeah. And that's the biggest thing. Um, I think now our hitting coaches do a great job of kind of realizing that everyone's thinking something different,
Sure.
and attempting to best speak their language to get them to where they need to be, regardless of like what philosophy they subscribe to,
Mm-hmm.
because that's not the important part. The important part is the results. So
Yeah.
it's definitely, and I think moderation is probably the best route, because
Mm-hmm.
the guys that swing straight uphill, they're typically pretty easy to spot and pretty easy to take advantage of with the high four seamer.
Yeah.
You know, and if you swing straight downhill, most of those guys aren't in the big leagues, but
Mm-hmm.
if they do, it's like you can get them out in front with off speed and whatnot. But it's just, um, I think the best hitters are kind of like not too extreme one way or the other.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you. I don't think you can go too far one or the other, and you've got to be able to have some adjustability in there. I think
Mm-hmm.
if you only subscribe to one versus the other, you start to lose that adjustability. I mean, if your swing's geared towards being able to handle a sinker in, with that kind of bat path, you're going to get eaten up by some of these guys that are throwing, 160 miles an hour with crazy spin at the top of the zone. Like, you're not getting there. And, and vice versa. Like, if you're trying to really just stay flat and handle the top of the zone, you're not going to get to anything at the bottom with somebody that can throw sinker sliders.
Yep.
One of the questions I would have is in terms of even more so like catching. There's really been a progression with catching, I think, over the past, probably since you've been in pro ball. I would imagine since you've signed, there's probably been a shift with things that are taught with catching, especially with receiving. Can you go into some of those like little things that you've seen change over the years?
Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, when I first signed, it was all about like blocking and throwing. Receiving, I don't even think I think it was like the year I signed was maybe like the first couple years that they even like discovered that it was beneficial to be a good pitch framer. It was always more the eye test, like, oh, this guy catches the ball pretty good. But so they just started to try to quantify it, and then that evolved over the years to where in 2015 the organization, our farm director Gary Denbo and our catching coordinator Josh Paul, they kind of came together because I was already a minor league backup in 13 and 14, which minor league backup catcher, it's a tough road from there. Like you don't have a lot of opportunity, and it's just it's extremely tough to dig yourself out of that like hole. So they decided to bump me down a level to high A in order to play every day because of my receiving numbers. Because I had perennially good receiving numbers every year, so they said, this guy is still worth something, even if he's not swinging the bat great. So that's when I really realized how much they valued receiving, as if they're willing to make a guy who had never hit in his career a starter just because of the receiving numbers. And so now it's obviously mainstream where we all know how much of an impact receiving can have on a game, and the supposed win probabilities and that stuff. But I mean, over the years, I haven't changed much with my stance or anything. The only thing I did recently, which actually led to my best defensive year ever, was I totally banged my ready stance. So I have no more, sitting high, like
your butt up and leaning
knees
forward
at 90 degrees.
Yeah.
I totally eliminated that because, we kind of realized that I can just block from my relaxed stance, and I can throw from there too. I mean, it just took a little adjusting too, but I actually threw way better than I used to, and I blocked way better than I used to, and my receiving stayed the same. So it was kind of the best of both worlds.
I think I remember one of my first days with the Dodgers. I mean, I sat down with our catching coordinator. We started going over catching stuff, and that was one of the things we had talked about was like minimizing that ready stance, just purely because I mean, if you think about it, like it really is an unathletic position to be in. Like you're up a little bit more, and you're, like you said, you got your knees at 90, and we both said like we've taught that for years. That's something that it's like we did as catchers, and you teach it as a catcher, and you just carry that on. But you're watching guys boxing pitches because they're in a very weird like setup where they can't get to specific locations, especially. And so I've seen a lot of catchers obviously trying to bang that big adjustment from like a primary into a traditional secondary stance.
Yeah, and that was pretty big for me, which was because you're so high up there, and then it started to hurt like my hips too, just because like I was so wide and like tried to get I tried to like keep my butt down but like be wider and more ready. I kind of felt like we needed to make an adjustment.
do you think that there's been a big adjustment with the use of technology or the reliance on numbers, to, like you said, to quantify those receiving metrics?
I mean, I think more teams um, are have a system to quantify it now,
Mm,
which is I think it's good because I mean, as long as your system is quantifying it relatively accurately.
mm-hmm,
But I think it's good because you can really see how you're benefiting the team.
mm-hmm, yeah,
Um, it just I think the more things are quantified, the more information you're able to get, and the more potential you have to like truly improve. Um, I think the game can't be played by the computer, but it's a very important tool to make sure that you're constantly performing at your best level.
yeah. Those numbers aren't lying, and
No.
your sample size is, it's huge. As a guy that's played for as long as you have, it's a big sample size, and so those numbers they're not wrong.
Yeah.
Do you think that the evolution into, the change in receiving or framing has been, because it seemed for a long time it was like this guy's losing strikes, and now it's flipped to now he's gaining strikes. It's not about not turning strikes into balls. It's more about turning balls into strikes. And I think you see a lot of videos of guys who potentially have taken it a little too far with some of the glove moves, like it's getting a little absurd, and not subtle at all. And, because it was always stick, it was stick pitches and expand the zone as the game goes on. And now it's like, hey, we're going to
Mhm.
start working from pitch one, and we're going to start moving pitches, but there's definitely got some absurdity out there with the amount of movement that's happening.
Yeah.
Is that,
I think that because it's all still relative.
mhm,
So like everybody can't be just gaining strikes.
yeah.
I mean, it's all based on the umpire's probability of a called strike. So
Mhm,
there's like the real strike zone, and then there's a circle where like the umpire calls a strike, 50% of the time or more.
mhm,
And so I mean, guys who are manipulating the ball, like if most of the league is getting better at the low pitch, that kind of like lowers that like the bottom of the zone. It lowers the bottom of the zone almost in terms of your strike probability. But I mean, sometimes I think if I'm going against a guy who's like really moving the ball a ton and not great at it, it almost makes me look better to the umpire because I'm more of the mindset of like I want to present the ball well to them. Um, and my whole strategy has always been like don't lose anything in the zone and present the ball well so that you'll get the benefit of the doubt on the borderline pitches.
yeah.
And like you know, I don't really get like pitches that are like a 1% strike probability because it's just like that's not what my style is geared towards. It's towards
Mhm,
like getting everything in the zone and most of the stuff on the borderlines, and cumulatively that ends up in typically like a positive score at the end of the game.
yeah. I
But I
I
mean,
I agree. I think there's a huge place for not losing strikes, making sure strikes are called strikes, and like that 1%, that's just a missed call. And I see some of the pitches that are called strikes, and as a catching guy myself, like I tend to give more blame to the umpire for missing it than credit to the catcher for doing an incredible job of, tricking him. And I think that's maybe flipped a little bit, with the mainstream thought process of, what a great job the catcher did. Like, no, that pitch is called a ball 99 out of 100 times. He just missed the call.
yeah, yeah. Um, Yeah, I mean, over the years, I've had, great success as a supposed pitch framer,
Mm-hmm.
but my strategy has never been like I'm trying to fool this guy on like these terrible looking pitches. It's just always been like if I present the ball well enough, I'll get more borderline pitches than I don't get. And the borderline ones are like there's a ton of borderline pitches every single game. So if you
Mm-hmm.
just kind of add a few of those here and there, and just they keep adding up, and it ends up being you know a positive score.
Mm-hmm. Keep the 50-50 pitches in your favor and flip the 60-40 in your favor.
Hmm.
Where do you see, I mean, with receiving having become such a big thing, where do you see it going in the sense that, it seems that in the near future, not too far down the road, there's going to be an automated strike zone. I mean, at some point it's going to happen. I just feel like they've gotten into so much tech from that perspective. Like and even umpires have said they think that at some point in the near future it's going to go to that. If and when that happens, how do you think catching overall is going to be affected? Is that turn into changing the catcher's, what you can do, like what your strengths are as a catcher? Does that turn back into a, block and throw first, or do you put somebody back there that can really hit if receiving really no longer matters, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I uh, I hope it doesn't come to that
Me too.
while I'm still playing, but
Yeah.
but I mean, I'm always just like, oh, got to make sure I hit,
Yeah.
just in case they do that.
Bang, and then they don't have a choice.
Yeah, yeah. So, but I mean, obviously throwing and blocking are still important. Um, they're not. You can't just have a guy that's going to give up like 8 free bags a game.
Yeah.
Um, so you still need to be proficient at blocking and throwing, and um, the knee down stance is like I think it's like great for blocking. Guys
Mm-hmm.
are I think I've seen guys start now blocking easier than ever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's and then blocking out of my relaxed stance is the same. Like I don't even go down if the ball is directly in front of me. I just put my glove down,
Mm-hmm.
and as long as I center the ball up, it just hits me in the chest.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I kind of see if that happens, it'll just be like, you got to put somebody that hits back there.
Yeah. I hope it doesn't happen. I think that would be bad for so many reasons.
Yeah,
But
it's just one of the little nuances of the game that I think it would be a shame if we lose.
yeah, I'm with you 100%. I would hate to see that happen. When you're preparing to catch, um, the process for you personally of getting into like the other team's scouting reports, and obviously, everybody has people who will collect data and present it to you, but how much, what is your process like going through scouting reports, and how much of that is dictated off of the other team's weakness versus your pitcher's strengths?
It just depends on the pitcher.
Mm.
So, um, depending on who you catch, some guys are best only working toward to their strengths, almost irrespective of the hitter's weakness, and then other guys are more, the guys who can do more
Mhm.
as far as command and executing pitches in different locations. Those are the guys who are more geared towards the hitter's weaknesses. So, um, like a guy like Granke comes to mind, where he just picks apart hitters' weaknesses,
Mhm.
no matter what. He adapts to them, and then a guy like Kershaw is going to go with his strengths, like
Mhm.
90% of the time. But for me, we have heat maps. I study the heat
Mhm.
maps of the hitters. I cross-reference those with the video, just to make sure that what the information that they present is correct in my mind. Usually there's no discrepancies, but I just do it to make sure, and because the video will help solidify the information in my mind, so that when I'm out there, I don't really have to think about it so much.
Yeah.
But then we before the game, the the pitcher and I will talk it over and go over the game plan. If he has something different to say we'll make sure we straighten it out before you go out there.
Yeah, I think I think matching video with what you're seeing in terms of like the heat maps or the numbers or anything is huge. And even umpire stuff. I mean, when you start to get accessibility to umpires information, where they're missing the majority of their pitches, I think you start seeing catchers looking into that stuff more, especially for, taking advantage of some of the things that they can do with their framing now.
Yeah. We have access to that too. So, it's not a huge part of the game, but it could possibly give you a little edge.
Yeah. I think especially if the pitcher's pitch characteristics match up, potentially with, somewhere. I mean, if you got a guy throwing a heavy sinker and that guy misses a lot of pitches on that, inside corner to righties getting into the slot and he just doesn't get a good view. I mean, maybe that changes your angle that you set up at or something, but
yeah.
What advice would you give to a young catcher right now?
I would say, I guess to a young catcher, I might just say, just master the fundamentals of the game, and then learn yourself as best as you can,
Mhm.
and then learn how to adapt yourself to be the best player possible, because it doesn't really matter what a coach tells you to do if they could be completely wrong about how to improve your game. Like
Mhm.
and that coach like isn't going to stay with you for your entire career. Like, you were my coach in high school, but you didn't
Mhm.
go with me to pro ball.
Yeah.
So like I
Go
had
on
to
your
deal with another coach telling me something else. So it's like you're never going to have, I mean, unless you're in the big leagues for a long time and that same coach is with you, you're never going to have a coach there for you every single step of the way. So it's going to be up to you to learn yourself and how to improve and to implement that.
I think that's so huge for players just because like exactly what you just said. Like from your perspective, like you're playing for that coach at that point in time, especially amateur players, and they're
Mm-hmm.
helping you and you're playing for them and you're moving on to somebody else, and for us, even in minor league coaching, we're constantly, having to remind ourselves like we're not giving if you're playing for us in rookie ball, I'm not giving you the one thing that all of a sudden is going to turn you into a big leaguer. It's like it's a collection of everybody around. So I think for coaches, it's like, offer up what you can and understand that you're going to help this guy while he's there. And if you, hopefully have the opportunity to watch him, push on in his career, like you hope that something that you provided them, they take with them. But now it's, you can be a resource for those guys, but at the same time, like essentially you're just a piece of the puzzle and you're not like the ultimate piece.
Yeah. I mean, one of my best catching coaches ever, Josh Paul,
Mm-hmm.
We're still close to this day, but I remember it was in 2015. I was having a lot of trouble throwing to second. Like my throws were horrible. And he recommended like doing the pivot throw, kind of,
Mm-hmm.
not taking the first step with your right foot, just pivoting on your right foot and throwing to second. And so I did it, obviously, because I respect him a lot, and I respect what he has to say. And I tried it for a week, and I was like still throwing bad. I my arm was killing me because I wasn't like using my legs as much.
Mm-hmm.
And so like then me and the catching coach in high A, we went out to the field to throw to bases, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try the other way, because like I really think that the other way is I can do it. I've just been really bad at it. Like I got to just figure out some way to do it better.
Yeah.
And like that day I was throwing like 185s right in the bag. And so I called JP and I was like, hey JP, like, you know, I'm sorry, but I don't think the pivot way is the best way to throw. And I was throwing great the other way. And so that's what I'm going to do from now on. And he told me, he was like, you know what, you just became a man, because I knew that you would grow up when you told me to F off. So basically his whole lesson was like, once you take your career into your own hands, that's when you become a man.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, ever since then, he like, there was like a difference in the way he almost like treated me. It was more of like, now I've like become a man rather than I'm like a kid that's, just listening to going with the flow, doing whatever. So that's kind of the moral of the story, is
I
just
think
take control of your own career.
I think that's such great advice because I think kids grow up and think that like coaches, we don't have all the answers. I mean, we like to think we do, but we don't, like we're not that sweet. We can't figure out every single thing you're doing, and that's one thing that's been really enjoyable for me personally at this level is like the conversations that you can have with guys versus saying, okay, this is what you need to do. Like, go do this. This is what I think is going to help you. Now you're going to go do it. And whether it works or not, like you're going to do that. And so,
Yeah,
like you
and
said,
it's not about being disrespectful. You need
no,
to respect your coaches and listen to what they have to say. But if that doesn't make sense or doesn't work, then you have to be man enough to say, like, hey, this isn't what I want to be doing because of this, and this reasons.
mm-hmm,
And here's what I'm gonna do because of this, and this. And like, you go do it.
100%. Could not agree more. And I'm going to tell you a story that I've used as an example because this was my moment when I knew you were becoming a man. And it was when you were probably like a junior in high school. Okay. I'd gone to like a coach's clinic. And, I was like 25 years old. I think you're at the time you're like a collection of the people that you've been around. And then you get into coaching and you're trying to soak up as much information as possible. Like you're trying to learn and you're trying to read and you're finding every resource possible. And, we're working together. And I remember I saw this drill and I'm like, that's awesome. I don't know why, but it's awesome. And I love it. And we're going to do that. And I think back, I'm like, this is the worst thing I've ever done with any player ever in my whole life. But we were doing this drill and I had you like laying on your back on the grass and you were like catching balls that I was dropping over the top of you. And we got done. And I just remember you kind of go, so what does that do? And I didn't have an answer. I couldn't remember like what the reason was for the drill that I saw, but I didn't have an answer. And I was so flustered about it. I'm like, God, dude, I don't know. I don't, we're not going to do that anymore. And we did it one time. I just remember you stood up and you go, so what does that do?
That's great.
It was terrible. My worst moment ever. Oh man. Hey, thank you so much for your time, man. I really appreciate it. And I wish you the absolute best of luck and really look forward to continuing to watch you this year.
Yeah. Thanks, Cap. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, buddy. Talk soon.